Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome back to the podcast. Big game in Norman on Saturday. Huge SEC showdown. Oklahoma versus Ole Miss. 2 6-1 teams. 2 teams with playoff aspirations on the line. You got a clash of football philosophies. Brent Venables preaches that suffocating, disciplined defense going up against Lane Kiffin's fast-paced and explosive offense. So we're going to break down all the matchups here. We're going to talk about the key storylines and what this game means for both programs in terms of the remainder of the season. So here we go. Thanks for hanging out with us on this episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. You've got an 11 a.m. kickoff in Norman, Oklahoma, Ole Miss. I feel like I say this a lot, but I really mean it this time around. I think I mean it every time, but this is one of those defining games of the season, just in terms of the respective programs, the SEC landscape. Both teams come in at 6-1. Both teams still have championship aspirations, both within the conference and then reaching the college football playoff. Both teams are trying to prove that they belong in these conversations, that they belong in the conversation with the Georgias and the Alabamas for a shot at Atlanta, that they belong in the conversation with 12 other teams in terms of a playoff spot. And this matchup gives you strength on strength when you look at Brent Venables' defense against Lane Kiffin's offense. But you go beyond the matchup itself, though, I think there's so much at stake for both sides. I think this game is about validation. I use the word identity a lot, but I think it's here. There's momentum heading into the heart of the SEC schedule. It's crazy how different these schedules are between the two teams after this game on Saturday. I'll break that down for you a little bit. We know what Oklahoma has coming up, but you may be surprised to see what's on the other side of Oklahoma for Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. So let's set the tone here for this game. Let's talk about the setting. The Sooners come in off of a dominant win over South Carolina, a performance that pretty much reminded everyone just how physical and how well coached this defense is. Oklahoma allowed very little through the air. They tackled well in space, and both sides of the ball. So shockingly, they absolutely controlled the line of scrimmage. It was that type of performance that you expect from a Brent Venables defense, though. It was detailed, it was intense, and we like that word relentless. We throw that word around a lot in Norman, but we mean it when we use it. But here's the thing. South Carolina and Ole Miss, 2 completely different challenges. With Lane Kiffin, what Ole Miss wants to do is they want to dictate tempo. They want to snap the ball every 15 to 20 seconds. They want to keep your personnel stuck on the field. They want to force your defense to make decisions on the fly. Their offense, it thrives on confusion, speed, creating those mismatches in space. So for Oklahoma, I believe this is really the first true test of whether this defense can travel. And I know I've used that phrase a lot. Here's what I mean. That they can stay disciplined and effective against an elite SEC offense that plays completely a different brand of football than what they've seen so far this season. And for Oklahoma, there's a lot on the line here. I think this is a legitimacy game. Oklahoma's had a great start to conference play this season. But there's still that lingering question out there that can they beat one of the league's top programs in a statement type matchup. What I mean by that is, like, you look at Oklahoma's the 2 years in the SEC. Their best win in the conference is Alabama last year. This year, their best win in the conference, probably South Carolina. But that Alabama game, it didn't really mean much. It made them bowl eligible, but it wasn't a statement type game. This is a statement type game for Oklahoma. Because people are saying on one side of the spectrum, Oklahoma's back in the hunt after what happened with Texas. That was an anomaly. That wasn't the norm. And then you got the people on the other side of the spectrum saying, well, Oklahoma hasn't really faced anybody of value. And the best team they played was Texas, which I disagree with that, but I digress. They smacked the Sooners around. Now, Texas did smack the Sooners around. But this game, this is a statement that will determine which side of that coin is correct. And while South Carolina, while that was a solid win, Ole Miss, it's a different animal. And what this game does is it gives Oklahoma a chance to prove, I say this a lot, it gives them that chance to prove that they're not just adapting to the SEC, but they're really ready to thrive in it. And that's a phrase I use a lot. You don't just want to be in the SEC, you want to thrive in the SEC. And beating middle tier, lower tier teams doesn't prove you're thriving. Taking off Ole Miss, that's the statement right there. But the second thing, I think this is an opportunity for Oklahoma to show offensive growth. The defense has been the headliner so far this season, and rightfully so. But I think if Oklahoma really wants to compete for a title in the conference, the offense has to take the next step. And John Mateer was super efficient last week. He was careful with the ball. He was consistent in moving the chains. But Ole Miss is going to push the pace. Ole Miss is going to score points. What that means is that Oklahoma, they can't just play conservative and safe and expect to win this game 20-17. They're going to have to stretch the field. They're going to have to create explosive plays. And we have an article up about this. Shameless plug time. We have an article up about this on the website, heartland-sports.com. This could be the week where Ben Arbuckle opens up the playbook. He opens up a little bit more than what he had against South Carolina. He mixes tempo. He gets Isaiah Satania and Giovanni Gibson more involved. He gets, go back to the tight end. You see what this passing attack can do when it's challenged. And I think lastly, when you talk about this matchup, there's the playoff picture. A win here would put Oklahoma squarely in the SEC title race and keep them in the national conversation in terms of the playoff. And while a loss, it doesn't end their season, it does raise more big questions about whether they can keep pace with the elites, and not just in the conference, but around the country. Now, if you flip over to the other side of the field, I think for Ole Miss, this game is every bit as big, maybe even bigger, because Lane Kiffin's team is coming off of a tough road loss to Georgia last week. They moved the ball, but they couldn't keep up the pace defensively. So they're 6-1, just like Oklahoma. They're 3-1 in conference play, and they have to bounce back in order to stay alive for the race to get to Atlanta. They've built their identity around explosiveness. You got a quarterback in Trinidad Chambliss who loves pushing the ball downfield. You've got an effective running back in Kewan Lacey who is merging as really a dynamic playmaker for Lane Kiffin. And then you've got a wide receiver group that is deep, and they can stress you vertically. So the caveat here is Oklahoma's defense is going to be the fastest, most fundamentally sound unit that Ole Miss has played to this point of the season. So that means that this is also a validation game for Lane Kiffin and his offense. Can they execute under pressure? Can they maintain tempo against a defense that disguises so well and thrives on their own communication? Because Venables' defense, it's not just physical, they're smart. They disguise pressures. They rotate their safeties. They force quarterbacks to read every inch of the field. And if Ole Miss wants to win this game, they're going to have to stay patient. They're going to have to avoid negative plays, and they're going to have to find ways to keep Oklahoma from substituting. And just like Oklahoma, the Rebels' playoff hopes, they kind of hang in the balance here. This would be a second loss, but here's where it would damage Ole Miss. If you're Oklahoma and you lose this game, you still have a shot for redemption. You've still got Tennessee. You've still got Alabama. You've still got, I know I'm getting them out of order. You got Missouri. You got LSU. But Ole Miss doesn't have that. As it stands right now, Oklahoma is the final ranked opponent on their schedule. Their schedule, South Carolina, Florida, Citadel, Mississippi State. Those aren't necessarily going to be bounce back opportunities in terms of the playoff committee's viewpoint when you consider that they went 1-2 against the 3 ranked opponents on their schedule. And one of those was LSU, who may not be ranked much longer. So a loss for the Rebels on Saturday kind of makes their margin for error not just razor thin. I don't know what's more thin than razor thin, right? Because they're going to need help, I guess is what I'm saying, if they lose. But I think maybe the most fascinating storyline in this matchup, it's not about a player, it's not about it's more about the coaches. You got Brent Venables versus Lane Kiffin. 2 completely different football minds, 2 completely different philosophies. Venables builds from the ground up. He preaches discipline. He preaches structure. Execution is a must. And what he wants to do is he wants to suffocate you. He wants to limit his squad's own mistakes. And he wants to make every yard that you get a yard that was hard earned. And Lane Kiffin, he thrives on chaos. He likes to be unpredictable. He likes to push tempo. He likes to be aggressive. And what he wants to do is to get you off balance, to create confusion, and then strike quickly before you can reset. And so essentially what you've got here is old school defensive mastery meeting kind of new age offensive innovation. And when you get those 2 styles colliding on the same field, usually it's going to come down to who can adapt faster. So can Venables keep his defense fresh against Kiffin's relentless pace? Can Kiffin find cracks in a defense that rarely shows the same look twice? I mean, this is a chess match. And so the sideline adjustments, the situational calls, those are probably going to decide the game on Saturday. So with that said, here are some general keys for the game, in my opinion. Now, we're going to dig a little deeper into each side of the ball for Oklahoma in the second and third segments of this episode. But in general, here's a few keys I think are really important. I got 4 of them. Number 1, Oklahoma's defensive substitutions. Venables' defense is elite when it can rotate fresh bodies. But if Ole Miss is able to control tempo, the rotations become more difficult. And so the Sooners, they have to get off the field on 3rd down. The second thing is going to be offensive balance for Oklahoma. And we're going to talk more specifically about the offense here in a little while. But Torrey Blaylock has been a revelation at running back. And if the Sooners can stay balanced, establish the run early, and then build play action off of it, they'll keep Ole Miss on their heels. I think number 3, you got to look at explosive plays. Ole Miss thrives on them. Oklahoma has to generate some of their own. You can't play Ole Miss safe, right? You can't keep it conservative for 4 quarters and expect to win. And then I preach this every week, and we saw the benefit of it last week, the turnover margin. It's so simple. It is so simple, but it's so true. In games like this, 1 or 2 mistakes often decide the outcome. So when it's all said and done, to me, I think this game feels like a measuring stick for both programs. For Oklahoma, it's about showing that their SEC transition, it's not just about competing, but it's about contending now in year number 2. For Ole Miss, it's proven that they can win in a tough environment against one of the country's best defenses. And beyond the rankings and the records, I think it's about identity. There's that I word again. Does Oklahoma lean into its physical defensive first style and grind out a win, or do they trust their offense to take a step forward and go toe-to-toe to shootout? Now, we'll find out on Saturday, but one thing's for sure, I think Norman's going to be electric. I know it's an early kickoff. I think the crowd's going to be crazy. And I think both of these teams clearly have everything still in front of them to play for this season, and that ups the stakes even more.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime Video.
That's going to be fun.
This week, the Minnesota Vikings head west to face the Los Angeles Chargers.
They'll take that all day.
Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern with football's best party. TNF Tonight, presented by Verizon. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial. It's the Vikings and the Chargers, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Welcome back to the Sooner Nation podcast. We are talking about the matchup that has everyone talking. SEC Nation is going to be in Norman on Saturday. Oklahoma versus Ole Miss. That's shaping up to be one of the biggest SEC showdowns of the weekend and maybe of the season. And I feel like it's one of those games where the storylines are pretty endless. We've already broken down some of the big picture implications. Now what I want to do is zoom in, right? Because normally we zoom out. We zoom out a lot, look at the big picture, but let's zoom in here. And one of the most fascinating matchups in this game to me is Oklahoma's offense versus the Ole Miss defense. This game is not just about who scores more points. Again, we're going to throw this word around a lot. It's about identity. It's about whether Oklahoma's offense can evolve. Can they open things up and complement what has been one of the best defenses in the country? Let's look at some raw numbers here. According to college football stats, Oklahoma's offense is averaging 6.58 yards per play, which actually ranks among the better marks in the conference. But here's the kicker. That's translating to just 29 points per game for the Sooners. It's efficient, yes, but is it explosive? No, not really. John Mateer, he's been steady. He's completing nearly 64% of his passes, 14 completions of 25-plus yards through 7 games. What that tells us is that the Sooners are moving the chains, but they're not necessarily hitting home runs downfield. On the ground, you got Torrey Blaylock leading a running back company that's averaging just 3.6 yards per carry. Again, that's a number that's serviceable, but it's not the kind of rushing average that scares defenses away. Now, on the other side, Ole Miss, they've got a defense that's allowing about 362 yards per game and 22.6 points. That's good, but it's not dominant. They're giving up around 5.45 yards per play, and if you're looking for a big red flag for the Ole Miss defense, it's right here. Around 167 rushing yards per game. Opponents are averaging just under 5.5 yards per carry against the Rebels. So what that tells me is that there's room for Oklahoma to work. If the Sooners can establish the run and stay ahead of the chains, that's where they want to be. So let's talk about strengths and weaknesses. For Oklahoma, I think the offense's greatest strength right now has got to be efficiency. They're limiting their mistakes, and you've seen them work to improve as the season progressed, right? Again, go back to last week. John Mateer protected the football. They stay on schedule and control the time of possession? That's huge against Ole Miss because they want to push it. They want tempo. And we're starting to see a little bit of a physical identity around the run game. You got Torrey Blaylock. He had that, the breakout performance last week in Columbia. And that's the kind of tone setting Oklahoma needs, I think, again, this Saturday against Ole Miss. But if we're going to be honest, the biggest weakness for this offense is explosiveness. This is an offense that grinds. It doesn't burst. It's methodical, but it's not electric. And that works when your defense is elite, which, Brent Venables' group certainly is elite. But again, at some point, you've got to threaten defenses vertically. You've got to make teams fear the deep ball. And Oklahoma hasn't done that yet. So you're looking at an Ole Miss defense that is solid, but not airtight. Against the run, they've struggled to hold the line against physical opponents. So their secondary, while athletic, they've given up about 7.4 yards per pass attempt in conference play. And that's a number that Oklahoma's receivers, they should be licking their chops over a little bit. So in summary, what I'm saying is Oklahoma's strength is efficiency and ball control. Oklahoma's weakness, as Ole Miss's weakness, physicality in the trenches and big play prevention. And I believe what we have here is a recipe that Oklahoma can exploit if they stay balanced. So where do the Sooners need to go to work then? I think there's 3 places. There's 3 things that they need to do on Saturday offensively. First, they've got to establish the run early. I can't stress this enough. If Oklahoma can get 2 or 3 first downs running the football on their opening drive, it completely changes the narrative of this game. Think back to what we saw on their first possession against South Carolina last week. Ole Miss has allowed over 160 rushing yards per game over the course of the season. So there's your green light. Feed Blaylock. Get Xavier Robinson involved again like you saw him in the rotation last week. Make those Ole Miss linebackers start creeping up, and that's when you hit them over the top. And that brings me to point number 2. You got to stretch the field vertically. Ole Miss, they're giving up over 7 yards per pass attempt in conference play. That means that the safeties can be manipulated. If you can establish the run, if you're Oklahoma, if you're Ben Arbuckle, you establish the run, then you dial up some play action. And I think that's where you can catch them. And I think what you're going to look for is for OU to take some early deep shots to Burks, to Satania, to Gibson. And even if they don't hit, you've got to make Ole Miss respect the entire field. So let's go to number 3. I think Oklahoma also has to use tempo and control the third downs. We know that Ole Miss likes to play fast. That's Lane Kiffin's entire DNA: chaos, pace, tempo. But Oklahoma can flip that script by being deliberate. They can mix in no-huddle moments. They can keep the Rebels guessing, but they can also grind it out third down conversions and control the time of possession. When the Sooners string together 8 or 10 play drives, not only are they putting points on the board, but they're keeping Ole Miss offensively on the sideline. And that's a great form of defense. I mean, I think Brent Venables will not complain about that. So if we're summing it up here, here's my 3 offensive keys for Oklahoma in this game. Number 1, start with control and then strike. They've got to establish their ground game first. Don't abandon it early, even if it's not flashy. If you do that, you pull the Ole Miss defense forward, and then you hit behind them with play action. Number 2, use tempo and formation variation. Arbuckle needs to, I think, get a little creative this week. Don't just line up the same way. Use motion, use bunch formations. Make the linebackers and the defenders from Ole Miss communicate, because that's where they can be exposed. And then take your shots, but stay disciplined. This is not the week to play conservative. This is not the week to play scared. But it's also not the week to get careless. Ole Miss is opportunistic. They'll bait you into mistakes. So when you go deep, go with confidence, but make sure John Mateer has the protection, and make sure there's route spacing done right. You don't have to score 50 points to win this game. You do have to score efficiently, though. You got to limit your own mistakes, and you have to keep your defense fresh. To me, here's the bottom line. I said it in the opening segment. This is a statement game for Oklahoma, but it's also a statement game for the Oklahoma offense. The defense has carried the load all year for Oklahoma. But this is the week where the offense needs to prove that it can punch back when they're challenged. Ole Miss is going to score. They are too talented not to score. So it's on the Sooners' offense to keep pace. It's on Oklahoma's offense to respond. It's on John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle to play with confidence. And if Oklahoma can establish balance, if they can protect the football, if they can stay patient, they'll win the game. They will. They're the better team. And they'll do it in the kind of SEC style that Brent Venables has been preaching since day one. So as we're getting ready for Saturday, I think we need to keep an eye on the trenches. I think we need to watch that running game from Oklahoma's side. And we need to watch how often Oklahoma tests Ole Miss vertically, because those three things, the ground game, tempo, big play discipline, I think that's going to tell us where Oklahoma is, what's ahead of them, and what their chances are of winning this game after kickoff.
Introducing Oakley Meta Vanguard, the new performance AI glasses designed for athletes. With hands-free capture on an action-ready ultra-wide camera, powerful open-ear speakers, and built-in Meta AI that syncs with your Garmin devices for real-time insights while you train. Take your performance to the next level with Oakley Meta Vanguard. Athletic intelligence is here. Learn more on meta.com.
All right, Sooner Nation, buckle up. Saturday in Norman, not just another SEC showdown. As we've been saying, it's one of those prove-it games. And this time we're going to talk about the defense. Oklahoma's defense is the foundation of what has been this rebuild for Brent Venables. They go toe-to-toe, though, with one of the most dynamic offenses in the conference with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. So on one side, you've got a defense that's been nothing short of dominant through 7 games. Oklahoma's given up just 213 yards per game and under 10 points per contest. That's elite. No matter the league you play in, that is elite. Now, on the other side, you've got Lane Kiffin's offense. It's a machine that's built on tempo, space, explosive plays, averaging almost 500 yards per game, 492, and putting up 37 points. So this is a classic matchup of discipline versus chaos, structure, and speed, right? And it's the kind of game that tells you if Oklahoma's defense is just good or are they truly great. So let's start with numbers, because they tell the story of why this matchup is so intriguing. Oklahoma's defense allows just 3.68 yards per play. That's the best mark in the conference. And when you hold teams under 10 points per game, you know you're doing something that very few teams in the country can sustain. And they've done it through 7 games. They're giving up, 118 passing yards per game, forcing opponents to dink and dunk their way downfield. But I think what's most impressive is how this group is built. It's a unit that thrives on gap control, secure tackling, and disciplined reads. So what I mean is that every level of this defense plays their synchronization, which is exactly what you need against an offense like what the Rebels have. Now, Lane Kiffin's group, they're averaging 6.8 yards per play. That's efficiency and explosiveness combined. They want to push the tempo. They want to stretch you vertically. They want to force communication breakdowns. You got a quarterback here who's been sharp, completing over 62% of his passes, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And when Ole Miss gets rolling, it kind of feels like a basketball fast break. It's one of those blink, and they've gone 75 yards in 4 plays. So something's got to give on Saturday. Let's talk about the strengths and the weaknesses on each side of the ball here. Because this is, like I said earlier, this is a chess matchup that I think is going to come down to who makes the better adjustments quicker. So for Oklahoma, the defensive strengths are pretty obvious. It's a team that's fast, they're physical, they're extremely well coached. The front 7 is anchored by players like David Stone, Jaden Jackson, R. Mason Thomas. They've been outstanding at reading keys and eliminating cutback lanes. Now that discipline forces teams to be a little bit predictable in certain situations, and that's where Oklahoma's pressure package really shines. Then you've got a secondary that's been kind of a revelation as well. Venables has built a coverage unit that keeps everything in front of them. So they've limited explosive plays, and they force quarterbacks to stay patient, which it's really hard to do with R. Mason Thomas breathing down your neck, And Oklahoma does a great job at disguising pressures. But there are potential weaknesses here. The Sooners have not faced an offense quite like Ole Miss. When you face tempo this fast, even great defenses can fatigue. Communication becomes harder, and substitutions are going to be limited. So if the Rebels can get Oklahoma's linebackers on their heels or catch them mid-rotation, that's where cracks in the foundation begin to appear. So if you're Ole Miss, you know your strength is versatility, right? The Rebels can hit you deep. They can run tempo screens. Their ground game quietly sets everything up. So when they're balanced, they are lethal. But what is their weakness? Well, it's found in consistency. For as explosive as they are, Ole Miss is prone to stalling out if defenses are able to disrupt the rhythm. You've got a 6.8 yards per play average, which is strong, but it's absolutely not untouchable. If they cannot run the ball effectively, you see their whole scheme begin to look a little bit rushed and a little bit forced. And when you play a defense like Oklahoma's, they can make your mistakes compound very, very fast. So how does Oklahoma slow this thing down? Number one, I think the Sooners have to force tempo shifts. Like Ole Miss thrives on rhythm. They want to dictate the pace. So if Oklahoma can slow the game down, if they can put them behind the chains and force the Rebels to huddle or at least hesitate between plays, what they do is they cut the possession count and they take away a little bit of the comfort zone for the Rebels. I think that starts with winning the early downs. You cannot allow Ole Miss to be like 2nd and 2, and you can't give up any easy conversions. The second thing Oklahoma's defense has to do is they've got to neutralize the deep ball. Ole Miss makes its living on chunk plays. And the Sooners need to keep everything in front of them. They need to tackle well. They need to force, 10 to 12 play drives as opposed to 4-play, 70-yard drives. The more plays the Rebels run, the more opportunities there are for them to make mistakes. You got a false start. You give up a sack. You give up a tip pass. That's the type of game plan. That's the kind of hitches that Brent Venables loves. And I think number 3, you've got to disrupt the run-pass balance. The Rebels are dangerous because the run opens up the pass. So Oklahoma's front, especially those defensive tackles, they have to win at the line of scrimmage. If they can limit the ground game to, let's say, 3.5 yards per carry, suddenly the play-action pass loses its bite a little bit. And then the Rebels are looking at 3rd and long situations instead of 2nd and short or 3rd and short. And that's when Brent Venables is able to kind of dial up those exotic pressures and simulated blitzes and all the confusion that he brings to the table. So let's lock in 3 defensive keys for Oklahoma on Saturday. Number 1, win the line of scrimmage. Everything starts up front. If Oklahoma's interior can control the trenches, that what it does is it collapses the entire Ole Miss offensive rhythm. You got to keep the Rebels behind schedule, and you got to keep their tempo, off. And when that happens, that advantage disappears for them. The second thing is you've got to pressure the quarterback in predictable passing downs. This is where the Sooners thrive. This is where Oklahoma makes its bank. But when you put Ole Miss behind the chains, that's when you are able to unleash your chaos. And Venables has been brilliant, not just this season, but across his career. He's been brilliant at disguising blitz looks. Linebackers showing pressure, again, safeties rotating late. And if Oklahoma can get pressure without surrendering gap integrity, the turnovers, the opportunity for turnovers will be there. I think number 3, you got to limit explosive plays. We've talked about this because it's a big one. Oklahoma has been elite at keeping the top on offenses. That needs to continue. What I mean is there's no 60-yard touchdowns, okay? No blown coverages. Every play that the Rebels get has to be something that they earned. Ole Miss, they can live. They can live with 8-play drives, but they die by 3 and outs. That they will fail, right? So keep things in front of you. Tackle clean and force field goals when Ole Miss gets into the red zone instead of giving up touchdowns. I mean, here's the truth. We've talked about it, and we're going to keep hammering it home because I've used that word identity so often so in this episode. This game is going to test Oklahoma's defense in every way imaginable. Because it's not just about stopping a talented offense. It's about handling pace. It's about communication. It's about thriving under pressure when the lights are the brightest. And if Oklahoma's defense holds Ole Miss to under 28 points, I think they win this game in every way. I mean, period. If you limit the Rebels to 28 or fewer points, advantage you, and you're going to win. But here's that word, okay? This matchup is the ultimate identity check. Brent Venables has built this team to thrive in the SEC. And this Saturday is really the first true measuring stick to see how far that progress has come. We know they've made progress. I mean, they're already at 6 wins on the season. They've got 2 conference wins under their belt. We didn't see those things until game 11 last year. So when you're watching this game, keep an eye on the first quarter because that's going to tell the story of where Oklahoma is. How quickly do the Sooners get off the field on defense? How do they handle the first tempo drive from Ole Miss? And when Ole Miss hits a big play, because they're going to, does the defense bend or do they break? Because I think if Oklahoma executes their plan, they're not just going to beat Ole Miss, that they're going to prove to the rest of the country that this defense is for real. A lot of people want to still identify Oklahoma with the old Big 12 standards, but you win, and you win soundly over Ole Miss on Saturday, now you get caught up in communication and storylines about the SEC standard, and obviously that's where you want to be.
This episode is brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. What do you bring to a holiday party? Simple. A bottle of Casamigos. Because nothing gets the party started like a Casamigos margarita, which isn't just for summer. In fact, it's the perfect pour all year round. Casamigos is the gift that always feels right. Because anything goes with my Casamigos. Please drink responsibly. Imported by Casamigos Spirits Company, White Plains, New York. Casamigos Tequila, 40% alcohol by volume.
All right, so let's wrap this up and talk about predictions for Saturday's game with Oklahoma and Ole Miss. The Sooners currently sitting, I'm recording Thursday afternoon, the Sooners are sitting as a 5.5-point favorite. Over-under right now is 52.5. I'll just give you my prediction, and then I'm going to tell you why. I've got Oklahoma winning this game 28-21, which would hit the under. But again, let me tell you why I feel like that's a good pick, right? First of all, we've talked about Oklahoma's defense. And this is really where the Sooners have separated themselves this season. They've been elite, okay? Averaging just 9.4 points per game, roughly 3.7 yards per play. That kind of dominance doesn't just help you win games, it covers spreads in close matchups. Ole Miss is used to feasting on weaker defenses and racking up stats against mid-tier conference teams. But this is a different front from Oklahoma. They're physical, they're disciplined, and they're very good at forcing long yardage situations. Their ability to control first downs and collapse rushing lanes, it makes it tough for Ole Miss to sustain drives or to rack up quick scores. Then there's the home field advantage for Oklahoma. Norman is loud. The crowd's going to have energy. Oklahoma Memorial Stadium really kind of rattles teams when they rely on tempo and pre-snap reads. The fans have become really good at disrupting that. And that's Ole Miss's MO under Lane Kiffin. A few false starts, a couple miscommunications, and suddenly that fast-paced offense turns into a grind. And that's why a 5.5-point cushion feels fair in this game, especially in a game that may see momentum swings. but not a ton of high-scoring bursts. Let's talk about game script for just a second. If Oklahoma can grab an early lead and just, let's say just by a touchdown, they can shift into possession control mode. This limits opportunities from the Rebels. It shortens the game. It forces Ole Miss to abandon their run game, and it plays right into Oklahoma's strengths. I think that's why a 7-point margin in my 28-21 score, it feels super realistic. The Sooners can control the clock with their run game. They can let their defense protect a 1-score lead. On the total, 52.5 over under, I think this game screams tempo tug of war. Ole Miss wants to run up the pace, right? But Oklahoma wants to disrupt it. So limiting explosive plays and keeping the game methodical, Oklahoma forces Ole Miss into those longer 8 to 10 play drives. Those are the type of drives that chew up clock, but they don't always end in scores. They don't always end in touchdowns. Combine that with a balanced run-leading offense when you're ahead, and you've got under territory written all over this game. I think both defenses are better than advertised. Ole Miss's defense they've tightened up in red zone situations, especially on third down, which means even Oklahoma, when the Sooners move the ball, the scoring can still stall just to field goals or long drives, that take time off the clock before you get a touchdown. Then you got to add in weather. It's going to be raining. Some mild temperatures in October, but it's going to be raining. Of course, that's what the weatherman tells us at least. So that's perfect for a game that's going to be played between the hashes. What I mean is it's going to be a run-heavy game, I believe. So everything, to me, when you look at this game, it points to a clean, physical matchup, but definitely not a shootout. Then look at this. Okay, let me talk one more thing before we close out. Oklahoma is 4-2 against the spread in their last 6 games when they're favored by less than a touchdown. And the under has hit in 5 of the last 7 games as well against ranked opponents. So Ole Miss, they've gone under 3 straight road games against top 15 defenses. So when you look at these trends, I think it reinforced what the stats and the matchups already suggest. That this is going to be a grind-out game, not a fireworks show. So here's what I'm saying. Oklahoma 28, Ole Miss 21. That covers the spread and hits the under. The outcome here assumes that Oklahoma wins this game by winning the turnover battle. I think that's going to be a big thing on Saturday. I think Ole Miss is going to hit a few big plays. I think they're going to stall on multiple drives. I think Oklahoma's offense scores efficiently while the defense keeps the Rebels from getting really living on explosive moments, I guess I should say. Not flashy, but disciplined. It's going to be exactly the type of game that Brent Venables wants. It's going to be the type of game that the Sooner fans want when you're talking about proving that you're built for SEC competition. So that's going to wrap it up. That's our preview. Oklahoma versus Ole Miss, Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff. Remember, it's not just another game. It's a statement. It's a matchup for both programs that will define their identities. I've given you the breakdowns on the matchups. I've given you the keys to the victory. I've given you why 28-21 Oklahoma makes sense. Now you do me a favor. Make sure you subscribe. Leave a rating for us. Share this episode with your fellow Sooner fans. I'll be back, obviously, Sunday. Hopefully, we're celebrating a win. I'm going to give you analysis. I'm going to give you takeaways. I'm going to give you what this means in the SEC race. But until then, enjoy your weekend, everybody. Enjoy your football.
I'm gonna be the man.